Hello, Blue Jays fans, and welcome to episode 285 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast. Yup. We're in the throes of winter now, folks. That's right. It's another week of Blue Jays Talk. Blue Jays Talk for all. We stream live Mondays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Facebook, Twitter, or the YouTube, where you can join in, ask your questions, your comments, and all of that fun stuff. If you missed the live showing, first of all, shame on you. Second of all, don't worry, it's okay. You can make up for it by heading to anywhere you find quality podcasts, click subscribe, and then you'll get every episode downloaded. Oh, man. It's going to be a fun week. Oh, boy. Downloaded to your listening device. And if you couldn't tell, this is your host, as always, Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. We really do have a great episode for you. Hopefully, I'll be able to formulate words as we progress through it. But we do have a great episode. We're going to introduce a new segment called the MLB Minute. And then we'll talk about who's going to make up the Blue Jays bench. There's a lot of, I guess, candidates that you could think of off the top of your head. Santiago Espinal comes to mind. Randall Grichuk comes to mind. Who knows where that could go? So we'll talk about that. And then, of course, we'll put a shiny bow on it with our ever-popular fake Blue Jays news. So to help me do all of that, we have host of the On Feck Circle Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the feckless wonder himself, Steve Feck. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Shaun. What I would do is I'd refer to me as Steve, since you're having problems pronouncing words. Feck is one of those monosyllabic mistakes just waiting to happen. So
That's true. And then we'd have to fill out a whole bunch of paperwork because then we're not a family-friendly show anymore.
Yes. Right.
Solid advice. Or maybe I should just stop talking. Although, not exactly a good idea when you're doing a podcast.
Or don't talk to me. I mean, you've got parents. You don't need to talk to me.
That's right.
Yeah, I'll just be eye candy here. That's all.
Oh, man, we're in trouble. Host of Sunny Side of the Dome Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Karen Suter. Good evening, Karen.
Good evening, Shaun. Good evening, Steve. Hey, at least you didn't say that we stream lies. So
True. Although before this episode's out, I may end up saying something similar. Who knows? Man. Yeah, so we were off last week. I just had my booster shot and I was feeling under the weather. But here we are. We're back. Apparently that 2-week break was not good for my speaking mechanisms. But we'll make the best of it. So I wanted to introduce first, we put up a new series at Jays from the Couch called the MLB Minute, where I thought it would be interesting to bring all of baseball and the discussion thereof to Jays from the Couch, right? Because we love talking Blue Jays and our readers love commenting and all of that stuff. And we have a lot of great discussions. But there's 29 other teams that we can talk about. So I thought it'd be a great idea to bring that to Jays from the Couch. And of course, if you're listening or watching at home, go to jaysfromthecouch.com, check it out. It's called the MLB Minute. And just quick little conversation bits. And from this week's edition, we have an interesting topic. I believe it was CBS Sports put out a piece going through all 30 MLB teams, listing for each one their best free agent signing of all time. So teams like the Rays, don't have exactly a long history of spending a lot of money in free agency. They don't have a long history anyway. Certainly not spending a lot of money in free agency. But then you have a team like the Yankees, who have a long history, first of all. The Giants, the Dodgers, a lot of teams have a lot of history. And then, of course, the Yankees have a lot of history of throwing money at everybody. Right? You know, I believe once they threw money at me. It was like, anyway, that was to pay me to go away. But I thought it was interesting because, we'll talk here about the selection for the Toronto Blue Jays. But the Yankees, for example, the selection was Reggie Jackson. Tough to argue that Reggie Jackson is not a solid addition. Had some dramatic moments in New York. But I found that very interesting of all the free agents they've signed over even the last 20 years or 30 years. But regardless, bringing it back to the Toronto Blue Jays, they said Paul Molitor. The signing of Paul Molitor led to a championship. Tough to argue against that. However, we have 40 plus years of Blue Jays history at our disposal. Is Paul Molitor actually the Blue Jays' best free agent signing in their history? Karen, I'll start with you.
Actually, I don't think you can argue with that. I mean, you sign a player, your team is coming off of a World Series championship, and boom, people wonder, well, can he fill in for Dave Winfield? Well, he not only filled in for Dave Winfield, you could certainly argue that he exceeded Winfield's contribution. I mean, not only in the regular season, but I think he batted .500 in the World Series, and he was World Series MVP. So how do you argue against that? I love Molitor as part of World Series history. I mean, you got some honorable mentions, a few of them very recent ones, but if we're just talking about number one, he's it for me as well.
Steve, how about you?
Well, I'm going to go back once upon a time. Before there was the internet and streaming and stupid analytics and MLB The Show, there was still Toronto Blue Jays baseball. And their first impact free agent signing was Doyle Alexander. And it's wonderful for a couple of reasons. One, the Yankees gave up on him. So for the first year and a half that he pitched for the Blue Jays, the Yankees were paying him big money, and the Blue Jays were paying him league minimum of $80,000 a year. So that makes it super sweet. His first year, when he came in 83, July of 83, joined the rotation. Not a great win-loss record, though the Blue Jays were not yet a 500 team by that point. He went 7-6, decent ERA, but he had 5 complete games. He started to instill, just like Dave Steve had. You now had a second pitcher who can go out there, go at least 6 innings, maybe go 7 innings, take that pressure off of a rather weak bullpen. Plus, in 84, where he led the league in winning percentage and innings pitched, he, I believe, 17-6, 3.53 ERA, 11 complete games. He even got an MVP vote, not just a Cy Young vote, an MVP vote. And then the following year, he finished 6th in the Cy Young voting. Was he Dave Steve? No, he wasn't even Jim Clancy, but he was a reliable pitcher that could go out there and eat up innings. More importantly, he was the first real veteran that Pat Gillick brought in and signed. I mean, you can argue John Mayberry, but those teams were really bad. As all the young talent was developing, this was Gillick telling the fan base, we are ready to contend. If we're not there yet, we're awfully close. And really, if the Tigers hadn't had that ridiculous start in 1984, the Blue Jays would have been down probably to the final weeks of the 84 season trying to win an AL East title. So I'm going to say it's Doyle Alexander.
Interesting.
Plus, they got Dwayne Ward for him. When they finally traded him, they got Dwayne Ward back in return, and he was a vital part of Blue Jays championship teams.
Right. Yeah, for me, I mean, the signing of Roger Clemens was huge. Like 2 Cy Young awards, and it wasn't end of the career Roger Clemens. It was top shelf Roger Clemens. Even though on a personal level, I'm not a fan of his. To me, that to lure him out of Boston that's huge. And then, of course, to win 2 Cy Youngs. However, the team went nowhere. So it's tough to say that is their best free agent signing. And I don't know, arguing against Paul Molitor, I think that when you have a team like the 92-93 Blue Jays, you know, they could have stuck with Rance Mulliniks, like Pat Tabler, Buck Martinez, any one of those three guys could have been in that spot, and I think they still would have done rather well. Would they have won a World Series? Probably not. But I just think that there was so much talent already there. That's kind of why I think it's tough to put a championship on one individual player. Go ahead, Karen.
Just a quick thought that the whole Clemens signing, I'm thinking that might have like pioneered the opt-out for Major League Baseball. The only thing is that I think Paul Beeston got himself into some trouble because he wrote it into the contract, but didn't file that part with Major League Baseball. But nowadays, I seem to remember that in all seriousness. But nowadays, opt-outs are a common feature of many contracts.
Yeah, you almost can't sign a guy without an opt-out, right? Get Paul Beeston sneaky in his loafers. Anyway. All right. So yeah, each week we'll have a quick little chat, something going around baseball. Obviously, contract negotiations, the collective bargaining process is happening right now. That would have been a low-hanging fruit, easy to talk about, but there's really not much to go on there, and it's been talked about for quite a while now. I don't know if anybody's noticed. So we thought we would go with something a little different. But remember, check out the MLB Minute Sundays, a Jays from the Couch. And, of course, we will have one item from that post to discuss on our subsequent podcast. All right. So now we need to talk about the Blue Jays bench. Okay. When you look around the diamond, I'm going to go quickly around. You've got Lourdes in left, George Springer center, Teoscar Hernandez in right. There's no way they're starting Randall Grichuk over Teoscar Hernandez. Maybe a late inning defensive replacement, but anyway, then you've got Santiago Espinal at third for right now. You've got Bo Bichette, shortstop, Kevin Biggio at second, and then, of course, Vladimir Guerrero at first base. And then, of course, Freddie Freeman at DH. Which, by the way, I saw on Twitter today, that's not a crazy idea. I believe it was even Ken Rosenthal who wrote about it, who said that even though they have Vlad at first, it's still something that could happen. Okay, Kenny. In Kenny we trust. But regardless, if you look at it that way, the everyday roster is pretty much set, right? But you and I both know that injuries happen and you need a bench. You need a solid bench, whether it is for that late inning defensive replacement. You need a stolen base. You know, like bring me a Rajai Davis. I would love to have one of those sitting on the bench. That guy could, stole my heart with his legs. Something like that, right? Or, for hitter matchups, things like that. Okay. So I guess right now, first of all, there's one big question here, and the kind of hanging over all of this is that the Blue Jays are looking for another infielder. You know, this has been talked about. This has been, this is not news. They're looking for another infielder. So Karen, I'm going to start with you. When you look at that configuration, the infielder has to be somebody who plays third base, right?
That's what I've been thinking all along. I've got Biggio penciled in at second base, and if the season started today, then I guess Espinal is your third baseman, and I like Espinal a lot. I just don't necessarily see him as their plan A, and I don't think they see him as their plan A. So as things stand right now, Espinal would be your starting third baseman, and so who is your backup infielder? Is it Kevin Smith? And I don't really want to knock Kevin Smith. He had a cup of coffee with the Jays late last season. He didn't do all that great, which is certainly not uncommon for a raw rookie. Huge numbers between what wasn't he league MVP or something at AAA? He was certainly the Bison's MVP. So huge difference between those numbers and MLB. But I mean, it takes most rookies time to adjust to MLB. The catch-22 for the Jays is they've got to be in win now mode for 2022. So it would behoove them in two ways. To get an upgrade, a proven third baseman to be your starting third baseman, because if Espinal isn't going the other way in a trade, then you've got a better starting third baseman, hopefully, and you've got a better bench player. So that's my hope.
Right. So then, Steve, Karen, I mean, brings it up perfectly that once you get past that starting lineup, the bench pieces, the depth, kind of falls off a little bit when your next man up, so to speak, is Kevin Smith, who had a little trouble in his first weighting of the MLB pool. So, Steve, I guess my question to you is, does the bench situation then for the Blue Jays, just specifically infield, is that cause for concern if the season were to start today?
Well, if it was going to start today, I would be very nervous. Yes, again, I'm with all of you. I love Santiago Espinal, but I think he's a bench bat. I really do. And speaking of the bench, they have to get a left-handed hitter. They have to get a left-handed bat on that bench. Now, of course, you have all the big names. I wonder, do the Blue Jays really make a lot of additions, but not necessarily the big splash like Freeman or Correa? Do they really focus on those mid-level players to supplement at third base? There's talk that Carlos Correa is going to sign in Boston. Does that free up Bogarts, who would then be a free agent, or Devers? I mean, there's all kinds of things that could happen that people would be out there for them to get. But I think the Blue Jays are going to really focus on quality mid-level people to not only supplement the bench, but also the bullpen. But I think the bench, they know they need to get a left-handed bat. And I really don't think Corey Dickerson's coming back. I would love, he's one of my favorite players ever to watch. But I don't know that he will come back. He's a big family guy, and he's always been a little bit nervous about moving his family mid-season or even too far away from where he lives in the South. So I don't know that he would want to come back. I mean, his kids are older than when he was here in Pittsburgh, but like when he was dealt to Philadelphia from Pittsburgh, the Pirates had better offers, but they thought so much of him, they didn't want to really have to ship him somewhere far, far away, because it was, it was the deadline. So I don't know that Kevin Smith is an answer as a backup infielder, but I also don't know that there were guys at Buffalo that were ready to really step in and do the bench. So that's why I think that's where the Blue Jays, and some folks will be disappointed. Oh, wait a minute, we could have gone after Freeman. We could have gone after Ramirez. I really think they're going to focus on a quantity of mid-level players that can fill in those bench roles, perhaps share third base with Santiago Espinal, and then kind of handle it that way.
Right. Except I don't disagree, in particular with your point about the infield depth that they have, in Buffalo. Like Kevin Smith was it, really. And, you've got the guys like Otto Lopez and people, there are names there, but realistically speaking, we're talking about playing at the big league level, right? There aren't a whole lot of options there. No one proven. There it is right there. Yeah. And so somebody, and Steve, you know what? You may be right. Somebody who has kind of versatility, teams in Major League Baseball love that. You can't just do one position anymore. You got to be able to do them all. And maybe somebody who can kind of float around the infield, because not only do we have to worry about third base, but this backup shortstop situation is something you need to think about, right? And watching at home here on YouTube, Lionheart70 says, the opinion on Ryan McMahon, he's a left-handed infielder bat. Personally, And I know Bob Ritchie here at Jays from the Couch likes the idea of a Ryan McMahon, and I think, Steve, that kind of hits your mid-level targets very, very well. And I would have to look at, like, how does he hit away from Colorado versus in Colorado? That's something that I would want to look at.
I think his power numbers, like raw power, like Homer numbers, would go down. But, he does use all fields. When he's on, he's very streaky. I don't want to make the Randall Grichuk comparison. Get everybody turned off to Ryan McMahon because I like him as a ball player. But he can be streaky. But when he's on, he's terrific. And he can play. He really can't play short, but he can play first, second, and third. And I believe in the minors he played the corner outfields, though really he's primarily an infielder.
Carrie, do you have any thoughts about McMahon?
Yeah, leave it to you guys. I must confess, he's a player I really don't know that much about. But that funny you were talking about Corey Dickerson. I wasn't sure if we were going to get to the outfield per se and then catchers, but I sort of was thinking about the possibility of Corey Dickerson coming back, like as a bench bat, as a left-handed option, whether they want to do matchups, and heaven knows that Montoyo, as much as I like him, just loves matchups. So, but I mean, Steve, it sounds like you know more than me about this because I really don't know very little about the player himself. So if he's someone that prefers a particular geographic area or something close to it, then maybe the Jays won't really be an option. So we'll see. But I mean, talking about mid-level depth backup guys, I think those guys are important. I just don't see that is necessarily mutually exclusive with another big splash. So we'll see how it goes.
Right.
Well, keep in mind, too, that McMahon, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Sean.
No.
You are the host, so I should probably raise my hand and be more polite. But McMahon was a big reason why the Rockies had no problem letting LeMahieu go. I mean, he's been a prospect in their system for a long time. But he still might be borderline prospect suspect because it's taken him much longer than they thought to actually establish himself as a major league regular.
So Karen mentioned the outfielder. I think that's we got to get there, and we've got to get to the catching. I think we'll talk about pitching next week. But for the outfield, with the starting three, you've got Randall Grichuk on the bench / late inning defensive / oh no, George Springer's hurt again. Is that enough for the Toronto Blue Jays? And Karen, I'll start with you. Is that enough for them this season, or should they be eyeing another, maybe even a left-handed outfielder, or should they just be eyeing maybe even a mid-level, or should they be throwing maybe those minor league deals out there with invitation to camp and all of that, just in case?
Yeah, I mean, again, they could do some from category A and some from category B. I've been with you, Sean. I mean, I know you and I feel similarly that we think it would improve the team if they would just show Randall Grichuk the door. But I mean, to be completely fair to him, he is still a pretty decent defensive outfielder. And if what we're looking at right now is a fourth outfielder, I'm not sure. I can't think of a fourth outfielder out there that would be better than Randall Grichuk. And interesting, a possible trade, which is obviously not going to happen now, but apparently there was a trade on the table at 1.1-for-1, Randall Grichuk for Jackie Bradley Jr. That might have been interesting from a Jays perspective. I mean, if anything, you can't ask for a better defender as a fourth outfielder if that's how you're gonna utilize him, and there's bounce back potential with the bat because he's had better seasons with the bat. So, but yeah, I mean, if they can make an upgrade, go for it. But it could be tricky between his contract and yeah.
Right. So then, Steve, what did they do with the outfield as it is right now? Is it enough? Should they add? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that Grichuk is the prototypical fourth outfielder. And given the fact that Montoyo and the Jays like to rotate players out of the DH spot, and he is such a solid defensive outfielder, Grichuk can fill in at all three outfield positions. Well, they let Lourdes DH, George Springer DH, Teoscar DH. I think that he's perfect. Do you want to spend that kind of money on your fourth outfielder? You don't. But, Karen brought up Jackie Bradley Jr. Jackie Bradley Jr. is actually making more money than Randall Grichuk. I mean, it's pretty close. So, I mean, is he as good as Jackie Bradley Jr. As a defensive outfielder? No, but he's pretty damn close. He's an awfully good outfielder. So I think the Blue Jays sit back, perhaps, if they don't get anybody between now and spring training, see who some of the spring training cuts and late cuts are, add another outfielder, ideally a left-handed bat, at the end of spring training, and I think that solves the outfield dilemma. But right now, if it was just the four of them, I'd be very, very happy.
Yeah. I think two interesting things for me. The fact that they wanted Jackie Bradley Jr. more than they wanted Randall Grichuk is interesting to me. We can maybe explore that another day. But then the other thing that pops into my head too is that any amount of time that they run with Randall Grichuk in the outfield is also at bats that Randall Grichuk has to take. And that's where I start to say, hold on there just for a hot second. But again, that's another issue for another day, because we haven't talked about the catchers. Right now, there are three: Reese McGuire, Alejandro Kirk, and Danny Jansen. Who goes, who stays? Really, Reese McGuire is a perfect backup catcher. However, think back to the Russell Martin, Deoner Navarro tandem. Really, you had two starters. Do the Blue Jays, Karen, I'll start with you. What do they do with that trio?
Yeah, good question. I still think that Kirk could be going the other way as far as getting immediate help, a third baseman, somebody like Matt Chapman. I don't know about Jose Ramirez. I mean, Shai Davidi still seems to think that it's at least a possibility. It would surprise the heck out of me, but I would not be surprised to see Alejandro Kirk traded before opening day. And if that's the case, then you've got your two catchers, Jansen, McGuire. If nobody gets traded and if nobody gets hurt, knock on wood, I mean, Kirk's got options, but do you really want that bat at AAA? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Like if somebody, I know people who swear that McGuire has trade value because of his defense, because of his framing ability and so forth. Seriously. I mean, if you could get another Adam Simber or Trevor Richards for Reese McGuire, then maybe you do it and you upgrade your bullpen in that way. So.
So, Steve, I'll throw it to you. My only concern with Alejandro Kirk not being on the big league roster is that you're wasting the talent that's there. But the other thing, too, is that if he is on the big league roster, you're wasting the talent that's there because he's going to have to split time with Danny Jansen. So, Steve, I guess to you, in your mind, how do you handle this catching situation that the Blue Jays are in?
Kirk's my backup. It just, I don't even blink. I don't hesitate. He's my backup. He's not going to get better by going back down to AAA. I don't believe he's playing winter ball this year, which is unusual because he's been playing in the Mexican Pacific League for the last several years. Even when he was very young, he was a regular catcher in the Mexican Pacific League. So he's played against ex-big leaguers. He's got enough reps behind the plate. I think he's fine. Do you maybe pick up another veteran catcher and stick him at AAA and then bring him up if need be, if there's an injury that happens, or if you want to get Kirk's bat in the lineup at DH more often, if he's not dealt, then sure. But I mean, Reese McGuire, he's served his time here. It's time to just cut things. I will bring up this thing, which I had not even considered, and I don't believe it's going to happen. but on 2 different occasions, well, today on MLB's Hot Stove Show, and on the weekend, Jim Bowden and Dan Duquette do a MLB Radio Network show. They talked about Gabriel Marino making the club out of spring training, and that they're nervous about the fact that spring training might be shortened because he's not going to have enough time to really make that final decision for the Jays. I would never have thought that, but that's another deal. Even if he's in AAA for 2 or 3 months, you can get by with Jansen and Kirk, and then work Marino into the situation between him playing a little bit of third base, letting Kirk DH. I think that's another interesting option that the Blue Jays might have in front of them come May or June.
If that's the truth, and the Blue Jays are really considering that to me says Alejandro Kirk is definitely being traded. It doesn't make sense to then and now all of a sudden have 4 catchers, that you have to deal with. Reese McGuire's out of options, so he's going to be exposed to waivers.
You really shouldn't say he's exposed.
Well, true. He's anyway, touche, my friend, touche. So he'll get claimed. That I wouldn't be surprised, and that's okay, sure. But then you're still stuck with now you have 3 quality catchers that you don't want to lose, and that's to me, if they really feel that Gabriel Marino is on his way up, then Alejandro Kirk is gone. There's no way I can get my head around that other than that, but we'll have to see how that plays out because that will be super fascinating, especially whether they manipulate the whole service time thing. No, wait, teams don't do that. Sorry, my bad. Before we get to our ever popular fake news segment, we've got Matt watching on YouTube. I love Kirk, but the team is better with him traded for an infielder or pitching. Hallelujah. Can I get an amen? Matt Sweeby, correct as always. Alejandro Kirk has more value to the Blue Jays in a trade that brings in a Jose Ramirez or even a Matt Chapman, really. But Matt, you and I, buddy, one day we're going to meet each other. It'll be at a bar somewhere and everything will stop. The music will be slow and we'll just walk in slow motion toward each other. It'll be so awesome. And I can't wait for that, Matt. Thanks again for watching as always. Anyway, it's time now. I love the fake news. I love it. All right. Jays from the Couch proudly presents fake Blue Jays news. Karen, over to you.
The Department of Homeland Security in the U.S. has foiled a plot that was concocted by 30 frustrated baseball fans, 1 fan from each Major League Baseball team. The group, who call themselves the Umpires, reportedly learned the location of Monday's meeting between MLB and the MLBPA and were planning on locking Commissioner Manfred and MLBPA Director Clark in the meeting room, refusing to let them out until they reach an agreement on a new collective bargaining agreement. The Director of Homeland Security issued the following statement. I, too, am a baseball fan, and I sympathize with this plan in theory. In reality, though, it would have amounted to kidnapping, and as such, we couldn't allow it to proceed.
It's particularly funny considering Angel Hernandez couldn't find the strike zone, so I don't know how he would find the meeting location. But anyway,
Well, they didn't use real umpires.
In other news, sorry. Okay. In other news, it's been announced that the split season idea between Tampa Bay and Montreal won't be happening. And of course, Jays from the Couch needed to know why. The real reason. Like always, Jays from the Couch did its digging and search of the truth, and we reached out to MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred for comment. We asked him the real reason, to which he replied, we're not sure about the logistics of having a team play in a foreign country like Canada. When reminded that the Blue Jays have existed for over 40 years, the call seemed to go to voicemail. Rob isn't here right now. Please leave a message and we'll call you back. I was talking to him, and then just all of a sudden voicemail. I didn't think that was a thing, but anyway. And in other news, this will come as a shock to many Blue Jays fans. Jays from the Couch has learned that Toronto Blue Jays president Mark Shapiro and general manager Ross Atkins have revealed that they are, in fact, not one person. They are two separate people with two separate jobs, responsibilities, and so forth. And so, as a result, the term Shapkins, or any other letter that you insert into that, is actually factually incorrect. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Shaun. As Karen mentioned earlier, representatives from MLB and the Players Union met in person today for the first time since the owner-imposed lockout December 1st, but pace and quality of play measures do not seem to be an issue for the players. With the implementation of robo-umpires in 11 AAA ballparks starting this year, it appears that robo-umps will become a reality in the majors before too long. Fortunately for the Blue Jays, the automation of baseball games does not concern the Toronto front office. Team president Mark Shapiro noted in a conference call that the Blue Jays have been on the short end of numerous blown strike calls over the years, including during the 2015 playoff series against the Royals. Shapiro shared that the team has already been phasing in automated aspects of baseball training and operations, including the use of a robo-manager since the 2019 season. Now, the lockout might not be the only serious threat to live baseball returning to the Rogers Center in 2022, with provincial lockdowns and COVID protocols casting serious doubts over capacity levels at Rogers Center, perhaps even the imposition of border crossing restrictions, preventing the Jays from starting the season in Toronto. To help with negotiations with city and provincial officials, the Toronto Blue Jays announced today they have retained the services of Svensson Barristers. The four-person legal team is best known for their efforts in trying to facilitate Novak Djokovic's application to stay in Australia to compete in the Australian Open, despite the tennis diva's blatant disregard for COVID restrictions in Australia and throughout Europe. Mark Shapiro is hoping their recent experience will allow the Blue Jays to minimize the effects of any provincial or federal COVID edicts on the team's 2022 season. At the very least, shared Shapiro, Svensson Barristers can help us find legal ways to keep Randall Grichuk, Trent Thornton, and Reese McGuire from obtaining their work visas, as well as blocking their AL East rivals from entering Canada. Now, since our last podcast, the Baltimore Orioles announced major renovations to left field dimensions at Camden Yards. No real renovations to their pathetic roster, but to their left field dimensions. Oriole GM Mike Elias explained the new measures were a way to bring the playing conditions at our stadium more toward league norms. The left field fences and seating areas will be moved 26.5 feet deeper and away from home plate, as well as raising the height of the outfield walls to 13 feet from its original 7 feet. In another step to normalize home run probabilities this year at Camden Yard, the Orioles will forfeit all home games against the Blue Jays after opening day. Back to you, Shaun.
How did I not know when you said robo-umps that you were going after Charlie? How did I not know? I just, oh, man. And that has been fake Blue Jays news. Before we get out of here, we have a couple of comments I wanted to get to. First of all, Karen, your fake news idea lent itself to or elicited this comment from XT Chad. It's a great plot to a movie. I happen to agree. Only if I get to play Rob Manfred. And Matt Sweeby had a question. Did I just invite him on a date? Well, Matt, to answer your question, I didn't not invite you on a date.
Da 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 da.
Oh man, we have too much fun and I love it. So it brings us to an end, episode 285 of the Jays from the Couch Radio podcast. My deepest heartfelt thank yous to Karen and Steve for joining me again this week. It's been a lot of fun and I deeply appreciate your efforts and your support. To those watching at home, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook, like Matt and XT Chad and Lionheart70, I'm sure you have real names, but that's what I see. So I want to thank you as well for for tuning in this week. And don't forget, if you're watching this or you're listening to the audio version because you've subscribed and it's right on your listening device, don't forget that you can, too, tune in live and submit your questions and comments, and maybe you, too, will get hit on by this host. You never know. You never know. But anyway, streaming live every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't miss the On Feck Circle tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Steve, very quickly, what have you got for everybody tomorrow?
Oh, I thought we were off tomorrow.
We are off tomorrow because this is not the week we do. Wah, wah. Too bad this is live.
Though people will probably want to tune in tomorrow because I probably make more sense when I'm not there than when I'm actually
well, just check out the
30-minute show. Yeah.
The archives.
But okay, right. Go back, check the archives. I can pretty much insult every level of Blue Jay fan, not intentionally, but it just seems to work out that way. But coming up in a future On Feck Circle, I believe I'm going to throw out the question: are the Blue Jays, or have the Blue Jays wasted some of their young talent? Have they already burnt them out or caused setbacks they're not going to come back from?
Interesting. They've already wasted 2 months of friggin' off season. Anyway, and don't forget, of course, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, but not this week. You can check out Sunny Side of the Dome. Go back and look at all the past episodes of both of those shows. They're really good, if I do say so myself. Karen, what have you got cooking in the old brain here for your next episode, just to give everybody a little tease?
Oh, I was afraid you would ask me. I don't have a clue. So sometimes the show just kind of comes to me. At some point in the 2 weeks, doing it every other week in the off season, some idea will hit me, and it's like, yeah, that seems interesting. So, yeah, so something should happen in the next week and a half or so, and I'll figure out something to talk about.
Like maybe a collective bargaining agreement.
There you go.
Oh, please.
If Karen is not there, she has been detained by U.S. Officials for perhaps planting the seed about a kidnapping plot involving Major League Baseball and the union. So we'll be running instead a little blurb where we can raise money for her defense fund.
That's right. We'll start a GoFundMe. Oh, man. Can you imagine, Karen? The people are arrested. I need a lawyer. I heard the idea on Jays from the Couch. I need it. Anyway, that will not hold up in court, by the way, in case anybody is out. Anyway, all right. So for Karen, for Steve, thank you to everybody. Lionheart70 says he will be back like the Terminator, and I'm glad to hear it. Thank you, Lionheart. We really appreciate it. For Karen, for Steve, for everybody at Jays from the Couch, this is Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. Hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.